Hi guys, today we will be doing the topic of discussing the invisible struggles of living with epilepsy. I've sort of got myself like a little list of questions because I've got the mind of a goldfish. Okay, so to start at the beginning, how did you first realise that your daydreaming or lapses were actually absent seizures? Okay, so my seizures began around the age of 12 to 13, I would have said. Never heard the term epilepsy before, didn't know what it was. But basically what happened was my parents kept getting brought into school, of my school obviously, sort of complain about my inattentiveness at lessons. So I was having a lot of daydreaming episodes and I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't bothering to learn the material, etc. If you'd have known me sort of growing up, that could not have been further from the truth. Like, I remember my history one in particular, it was she was crueler than she should have been, to be fair. And I'd built this big wall chart of the Cold War, so a timeline, and I made it so long it literally stretched from one end of the room to the other. And I made sure that every time I walked past it, I made sure I studied it, learned it, etc. Information still wasn't going in, and I was still having these daydreaming attacks. And you're like, And eventually, sort of, I think it was my dad sort of brought in this wall chart, and he's just gone, look, this is what she's done. She's clearly studying. Something's wrong. And sort of eventually, I think I had a seizure in front of a school nurse, and that's when I got referred to a paediatrician, who then did diagnose me with suspected epilepsy. So that took about a year-ish to diagnose me, I would have said. What were some of the early challenges you faced with school and memory after your diagnosis? Okay, so medication has a massive impact on your memory, because as soon as you get the epilepsy diagnosis, they put you on medication because that's going to cure it. It's going to be brilliant. But I'm drug resistant. I just didn't know that at the time. And one thing that I'd noticed was that lamotrigine, the one I was on at the time, it made my memory and I just wasn't taking anything in at all. And so this sort of went on for a year or two, because I remember I sat my GCSE mocks and I failed the lot, all of them. And I think one that you sort of draw attention to, for example, was say the biology mock. I got a U in that, so ungraded, terrible. And they switched my medication to Keppra, so levetiracetam. And I sat the actual GCSEs, so it would have been year 11. So within the next year. I wasn't studying any harder. I hadn't changed my tactics. I was doing exactly what I'd done before. And that biology exam, the one I got a U in the mock, I got an A at GCSE. And that is a classic example of what the medication can do to you. It's horrible, but that's just what it is. So it really sort of affected my school life. And yeah, I'm always writing down sticky notes and stuff. Memory's terrible. Okay, so how did medication side effects impact your daily life, confidence, or self-image? It really affects your confidence. So I had a seizure where, sadly, it was a tonic-clonic seizure at school. It was during a PE lesson. So I didn't know anything was going to happen. And the next thing I know is I'm waking up on the floor. PE hall is being completely emptied, and some very concerned teachers are looking at me. I'm like, what's going on? And it turned out that I'd just dropped to the floor and started fitting in front of my entire class. So that was a tough one. And no one really looked at me the same way after that, which is a bit unpleasant, but yeah, it is what it is. So my self-image, not great. My confidence was shattered, and the medication on top of that sort of really pushes your brain power down. I know it's trying to control the seizures, but it also somehow makes you quite dim, which is not a very nice way of saying it, but yeah. Okay, so Can you describe how epilepsy affected your social relationships and friendships during your teens? I think I've always been a slightly socially awkward person, maybe. I don't know. And so sort of I really did try and make friends. I did. But as soon as someone either saw me have a seizure or they learned of the condition, it was like, no, not touching her with a barge pole. And that I struggled with that. So most sort of breaks, lunch breaks, etc., I would spend on my own, and how should I say, the library, or just find a quiet bench somewhere, because it was easier than trying to deal with people. So yeah, I struggled a lot. What coping strategies helped you manage the unpredictability of seizures? I think you really have to take on an attitude of, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You know, it's funny. Whilst it's a terrible condition to have, it really does teach you not to fear much. When you've done as many seizures, scans, tests, surgeries as I have, you really do learn to be fearless with these things. And if the seizures are coming, the seizures are coming. There's not much you can do to stop them, unfortunately. Okay, so next question. How did learning about SUDEP and other risks change your outlook on epilepsy? Okay, so SUDEP is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. People don't really talk about it much. It's a pretty taboo subject. It's one of those things, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It basically means that one day you might not wake up, you know. You try and manage risks as best you can. So you do things like you don't take a bath on your own, or you try and avoid cooking with sharp knives, or I don't go out on my own. There's certain things you can do to mitigate risks. But SUDEP, as long as you take your medication on time and do what you can do, like as best you can, there's not much else you can do. But yeah, just keep taking medication on time. Don't overexert yourself. Don't like go binge drinking and not get enough sleep, that kind of thing. What advice would you give to someone newly diagnosed about advocating for themselves at school or work? Oh, that's a tricky one. I've had a couple of jobs. My past one, I worked at a special needs school. I was their fundraiser, and I got a lot of things, you know, a lot of funds raised, and it was quite a good achievement. But I think the subject of epilepsy was always there. And I think that they were sort of always looking, yeah, I'll let you fill in the blanks on that one. Advice I would give to someone is be upfront about the epilepsy straight away. If someone is going to discriminate, sort of based on your condition, you don't want to work there. Find somewhere that sort of acknowledges your condition, tries to make allocations to sort of help you where they can. Go work there. You don't deserve to have people that discriminate against your condition. So that, yeah, stand up for yourself. This is essentially what I'm saying. Okay, so how did the journey of multiple medications, tests, and potential surgery shape your resilience? It does make you a tougher person. Sort of when you're first diagnosed, you sort of think, okay, I'm just going to have some EEGs where they just stick the electrodes on with horrible glue. So it is like super glue. You have to use nail varnish remover to soak it and then get the chunks out. It's disgusting. It's like, but I can't really give you advice there. It just makes you a stronger person. You sort of learn to cope with each scan, each medication. So in my case, I've been off many, many medications and none of them have worked. You know, most people with epilepsy, the medication works for them on the first, second, maybe even third try. Once you start going past 5, 6, sort of 7 tries of like new medications, you just become resilient. And unfortunately, right, how do you balance daily living with epilepsy whilst managing its limitations? I mean, as best you can, try not to let it hold you back. So like, if you've got a dream job or whatever you want to do, go and study to do it, you know. So I did I finished my GCSEs, I did some A levels, and then I went on, I got a bachelor's degree in law. So, I sort of completed a fairly decent education. I now deal with estates and probate. I sort of help administer all that kind of stuff. Very boring. But if you want to do something, go for it. As long as it's not like becoming a pilot or something, as long as it's something that you can do, why not? It's sort of put measures in place to help yourself. So like I said, don't go out on your own, don't go binge drinking, don't like have irregular sleep patterns, whatever. Help yourself as best you can and try and reap the rewards, I guess. Okay, so what do you want viewers to understand about the invisible aspects of epilepsy that aren't obvious to others? If you see someone that's just sort of stopped in the street, or is sort of like almost like having a daydreaming attack, just stop and ask if they're okay. And if they're sort of mumbling or like really confused, they could be having a seizure. So when I had lit surgery, I went 4 months seizure free, which I think I've covered in another one of my videos somewhere. And so I was allowed to start going out on my own, and sort of to my local shops, etc. And I was crossing the road at one point, and this is like the court suspected instance where I'd had an absent seizure after the surgery. And I remember crossing the road, and I think it was an impaired awareness seizure, which I've never had before. I've never had one of those. And yeah, I was crossing the road, and all I could remember was that I couldn't see, but I could hear. So I could feel that I was still stood in the road. I could sort of feel that no one was helping. Everyone had just crossed and got on with their lives. And I'm just stood still in the middle of the road. And I remember hearing cars beeping, people shouting, but like not in a nice, oh, help her out the way. It was like, oh, what are you doing in the road kind of stuff. And I just couldn't move my body. I couldn't see and I couldn't move, but I could hear everything that was going on. And not a single person stopped to help. And that's the reason why people with uncontrolled seizures shouldn't really go out on their own, because you're not always going to have someone there to help. And I would say that's not obvious to people. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's just go out." No, you can't. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But you have to manage the condition the best way you can, the safest way you can. I think that I wouldn't say let anything hold you back, but you do have to accept your own limitations sometimes. But, yeah, I hope you found the video informative, helpful. Yeah, please do like, share, subscribe, etc. And yeah, hope to see you next time. Right, bye.